Well, since the financial collapse 4 years ago, one of the biggest issues in this country has been the bursting of the housing bubble and the large number of foreclosures that have happened as a result. Depending on where you look for information, nearly 1/3 or 1/4 of all homeowners in the U.S. are underwater on their mortgages. Take a look at this map from June of this year. The dark reddish color represents the area hardest hit by the foreclosure crisis. That's parts of the South, the Midwest, and the West. So what's the solution? Well, some have been calling for the Federal Housing Finance Agency, which oversees Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, to give the green light for principal reductions to be offered to people who have been late on their payments as a part of the Home Affordable Refinance Program, a way to cut the principal and therefore monthly mortgage payments for struggling homeowners. While the FHFA has just given their response, they will not, in fact, take part, which means many struggling homeowners could drown by this debt. I want to talk more about this with Anthony Randazzo, Director of Economic Research at the Reason Foundation. And Anthony, I just want to first ask you your take on this decision.
Well, this wasn't incredibly surprising. The FHFA has talked about HAMP and whether or not they want to participate in this program over the past several years. It's been debated back and forth. They have thus far said they don't think that participating in it is going to be good for taxpayers who are bailing out Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's losses, and this would involve taking on losses. So it wasn't incredibly surprising. I think the thing to remember, though, is principal reductions, while they're a great solution for some, are not a magic bullet, and that's what Ed DeMarco is trying to weigh here.
But taxpayers bailed out the banks. They bailed out the people who didn't actually really need it. And in addition, Anthony, I mean, nearly all the economic institutions from the U.S. Treasury to the Federal Reserve and even the IMF have backed principal reductions. I guess, what's the discrepancy here?
Well, the taxpayers don't have to keep bailing out Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I think that's the first point. Is yes, we've bailed out a lot of institutions that shouldn't have had to get it. That doesn't mean we need to keep it with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. But more to the point with principal reductions. Yes, they work in some cases. That's why some people back them. But look at the results of the program that we're talking about, the Home Affordable Modification Program, HAMP. 50% at minimum of people who have gone into that program have wound up redefaulting on their mortgage. The point of this, the point of principal modification is to, in theory, help families that would otherwise be able to make payments on their homes. And they just gotten behind, and if only we could lower their payments. Well, when we've done that through this program already, at least half of them have redefaulted. So when Ed DeMarco looked at the numbers and he looked at what the maximum outcome could have been and what the minimum benefit to the taxpayers would have been, and he assumed about a 50% success rate, he said, look, the numbers just don't add up for this to be beneficial for taxpayers.
But I wonder, if all the numbers are being included in the equation here. Certainly, you can look at figures like that 50%, which, is frankly really sad. But there's other numbers that are out there. I mean, between the upkeep, the increased safety needs, and the lowering of property values around foreclosed homes, there have been estimates that have put the cost of each foreclosed home at about $30,000 to the community and to the government. So talk a little bit about this and how these kind of numbers also factor in.
Those are very important numbers, and that's why some banks have begun doing principal reductions in certain cases. Now, some banks or mortgage investors who do own mortgages, they are aware of those costs, very aware of those costs, and they put that into their calculations. And ultimately, it's, is this what's beneficial for the stakeholders in a particular investment, for different investors who put money out? They say, we actually think that if this home went into default and given all of the upkeep costs, if we sold it on the market, we would get more money back than if we lower the mortgage payments. So that's the analysis that's having to go in. And you and I can't sit here and determine for the mortgage investors or for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac what that calculation should be, because we don't have that right in front of us. What we do know is that FHFA is very aware of what you're talking about. And I, for one, would like FHFA to consider mortgage principal reduction, considering those costs, if the calculations show that that's what would be good for the taxpayers. We don't have those books to be able to go through all of this. And so to me, I think it's to say that principal reduction is the only solution is a little bit of sort of idealism coming in, or even sort of a political persuasion that I just don't think is appropriate when we're talking about the housing market.
I guess I'm just wondering then, for yourself and for others who don't see principal reduction as the best choice here, have you heard any options that are better, that you think would work and perhaps benefit the taxpayers? and still benefit those who need it?
Well, once again, I think principal reductions are the solution for some families and not for all. And that has to be made on an individual basis. So I think that's step one. For those who it's not, I think that really the answer is for people who are underwater that can continue to make your payments, keep making your payments. The cost of your house will probably come back up at some point. That doesn't mean that you have to default. And for families who are underwater and can't make your payments, and have to walk away from the home or have to declare bankruptcy or have to figure out a way to sort of step away from that into renting, I think we need to shift mentally in the country to not criticize renters and to not say that because you're renting, you are less of an American or you're not achieving the American dream. That's not an easy solution. It's not a silver bullet. And it's not something that is easily encapsulated in a political soundbite. But I think that really it's that multi-level approach, shifting the way that we think about home ownership in America, and be willing to accept some losses is the only way we're going to be able to move forward.
But as we know, Anthony, the government, and especially in a political season as we are now in a presidential race in a few months, the government likes to come up with solutions and likes to put forth strategies so that people in this country living on streets with, their neighbors, homes foreclosed, I get what you're saying, that there's not, a sweeping solution for everyone. But the government sure likes to give them anyway. I mean, what do you say for this? Is there a possibility that there could be some more that the government does?
I think that backing away from restricting foreclosures, I think that one, stepping back and not giving helping hands to banks and say, actually, you know what, banks, you actually are going to have to take the losses on this stuff. Where the taxpayers aren't going to take the losses. Those are two programs I would like to see the government step into place. But really, I mean, the ideas that we keep coming up with, such as using eminent domain to forcibly take mortgages from mortgage investors, I think we're really risking rule of law. I think that we're damaging the housing market going forward, which should be, that's a calculation that needs to come into play. If principal reductions, let's say that for and giddles, that is the good way to handle this problem. Well, that's going to be very problematic for investors in the future, knowing that the government can just come in and forcibly modify down mortgages. So it's going to be the worst housing market in the future. That's a calculation that FHFA is putting into place. I don't think that fixing the housing market is something that the government needs to do or should have to do right now.
Yeah, certainly it's very difficult because there's no black or white response here. And there's a lot of numbers not adding up, but certainly everybody trying to put forth what they think is best. A lot of different answers here. Anthony Randazzo, Director of Economic Research at the Reason Foundation in Fairfax, Virginia. Thanks so much.
Thank you.